Hey guys, tonight we wander down a smoke-filled alleyway to the back door of a timber tavern where you, the alewife, are already elbows deep in warm, foaming mash. The firelight flickers against soot-darkened beams and the smell is earthy. Let's call it earthy. You're stirring a great wooden vat with a paddle the size of a canoe oar, and every muscle in your arm remembers the motion. Ale doesn't brew itself, and neither does gossip. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You started this business after your husband, may he rest somewhere drier, passed on during a particularly damp harvest. But you've kept the tavern going. The brewing's done out back, the drinking's done out front, and the cursing echoes through both. By dawn, your tunic will reek of malt smoke and something less poetic. But the coin is real, the regulars are loyal, and even the town reeve knows better than to cross a woman who controls the town's drink. Brewing in the medieval period wasn't just an art, it was a necessity. Water wasn't always safe, so people drank small ale, a weak beer, even at breakfast. And in many towns across England and parts of the continent, it was women alewives who made that happen. Before brewing guilds shoved women out, this was your domain. You stir, weight test. The trick is to listen. There's a faint sizzle when the temperature is right, a sour note if the wort's gone bad. You tie a linen cap over your hair. Scalp burns from steam are a real thing, and check the fire beneath the copper cauldron. A cough from the front room reminds you time to fill the pitcher again. Your tavern's walls are thick with layered soot and low-hanging beams. The stools are uneven. One customer swears he saw a mouse carrying a breadcrumb as big as his own head. Another insists your ale healed his sciatica. You smile politely. You know better, it was probably the onions. Historians still argue whether women brewers were truly respected or simply tolerated until they got too successful. The church, the guilds, even some jealous husbands found it awfully convenient to call an independent woman a witch, just around the time her business got profitable. Funny how that works. You've had your share of whispers. They said you stirred the brew backward under a full moon, that you sprinkled nettle into the barrel to make men fall in love, that you added henbane and danced with a goat. You don't mind. The men still come back for more, especially the ones who mock you loudest. One quirky tradition still clings to your work, like steam on your brow, the ale stake. A little broom or branch hung above your door means a fresh batch is ready. You made yours from rosemary and rowan tied with red string. They say it wards off evil. You say it keeps the drunks from knocking twice. Out in the yard behind the coop barrels are cooling in the shade. You'll seal them later, chalk their dates, roll them to the cellar. You know which ones will ferment into bliss and which will sour no matter what. You've got a sixth sense for spoilage. Maybe it's the nose. The local reeve stops by once a week to test the ale's strength, ensuring you're not watering it down. You offer him a cup smile just wide enough, and he stumbles out an hour later, convinced your books are in order. You didn't even show him the books. You sometimes wonder how many lives you've saved. Not with potions or prayers, but with clean, hearty brew that didn't carry typhoid or lead. Women like you were quiet public health workers long before the term existed, and still they say you're just an alewife. As the tavern fills tonight, you set down another round nod to the bard and slip back into the brew room. It's warm here, loud in its silence. You inhale the nutty sweetness of malt, the ghost of hops, the breath of fire. This is your cathedral, your altar, your revolt. You're perched on a low stone wall, lace-covered fingers stroking the feathered back of a saker falcon, though no one in the courtyard will ever credit you for it. They'll say it's your husband's bird, his skill, his precision. But you're the one who wakes before the sun to feed it raw hair, the one who learned every chirp and wing tremble long before he did. You, the falconer's wife, though the bird only answers to you. Your fingers are calloused from tying jesses and scraping beaks. You wear a glove that smells like iron and poultry. The nobleman's boy watches you, nose wrinkled but wide-eyed. He doesn't blink when the bird launches slicing air in an elegant dive. You're the one who trained that, not your husband who spends more time polishing his boots than bonding with raptors. In medieval courts, falconry was as much about status as sport. Everyone wanted to be seen with a bird on their arm, especially the ladies. But handling the birds, that was messy, dangerous, reserved for men or for women like you, who worked behind the embroidered curtain. You learned by watching, by patching up bruised wings, prying splinters from talons, whispering Latin names until they stuck in your memory like burrs. You're not allowed to speak up during the Lord's hunts, but when the gyr falcon refuses to fly, you're the one summoned in the quiet. And the bird settles, of course it does. You trained her from chickhood. Historians still argue whether noblewomen practiced falconry directly or only posed for tapestries with birds they never truly controlled. Some say it was all image. Others point to manuscripts and even royal letters, hinting that at least a few women, perhaps more than a few, were skilled enough to handle birds without chaperones. You would have been one of them if birth had placed you in a gown instead of an apron. The weirdest thing falconers used to house their birds in the same room where they slept. Not for warmth, hawks don't cuddle, but for bonding and vigilance. You remember those nights half asleep, startled by the scrape of claws on perch, or the sudden flutter that sounded like a ghost. The birds dream, you swear they do. Sometimes they screech in their sleep, chasing prey across invisible skies. You whistle low and your socker swoops back into view, talons extended. The landing is clean. The crowd claps for your husband. He nods like he deserves it. You say nothing. There are quiet perks. Nobles forget you're nearby when you feed their birds. You hear their secrets, their travel plans, their trysts. You know which knight is leaving for the border, which lady is expecting a child she hasn't told her husband about. You file it all away like you do with molted feathers and leftover quail bones. You once stitched a falconry hood from soft deerskin lined with fleece. The Lord said it calmed the birds. Your husband took the credit. Of course, you don't mind much anymore. You have the birds, their trust, their eyes that fix only on you, even in a crowd. When the world around you talks of power and male glory, you simply hold out your arm and something wild and regal lands upon it. And that is its own kind of throne. You pinch your nose and lean over a shallow vat of cold, gloppy liquid, its surface gleaming faintly blue in the gray morning light. It smells, let's not pretend, like something crawled in and gave up. But you're not here for the aroma, you're here for color. Specifically the kind of blue that makes noble women sigh and monks weep with envy. You are a woad dyer and your yard smells like a bog's bad day. The linen hanging behind you will take on the richest blues once it's done steeping. Right now it's pale and shivering in the breeze, but give it time. The real magic happens when air hits the cloth, oxidizing the fermented dye and coaxing out its royal hue. No purple, no emerald, no blood red ever made people gasp like this strange shimmering indigo. The pigment comes from the woad plant Isatis tinctoria, which you cultivate like a grumpy child. It's stubborn, temperamental, and needs rotting to work. That means chopping, fermenting, stirring, and waiting, in a pit that sometimes attracts more flies than customers. And guess who's the one doing most of it? Right again, your hands are stained. Of course, permanently smudged with blue that settles into your nails. Your knuckles, even the wrinkles on your palms. In Summer Village, kids run screaming from you, calling you a demon or a forest witch. You wave and wink. They'll wear your cloth one day, won't they? Historians still argue whether women were central to the woad trade or simply used as cheap labor by larger dyeing guilds. In some towns, records show women owning dye houses outright. In others, their names vanish behind male relatives. What's undeniable is that the smell of ammonia, essential for processing the pigment, was everywhere women like you worked. And yes, that was often sourced from urine. Human. Male. Collected in buckets and ladled by hand. You laugh now, thinking about the times you knocked on doors, asking for the daily offering. People would groan, but they'd hand it over. You gave them a rag dipped in silver later, didn't you? The color blue used to be sacred, rare, worth more than gold in some corners of the world. Only royalty could afford robes dyed in indigo or lapis. But with woad, you brought that majesty to the rest of the realm. A peasant girl in a pale blue veil, a merchant's wife in a skirt that darkens toward dusk. They might never thank you, but your pigment drapes them just the same. Once you saw a knight wearing a surcoat the exact hue you'd perfected, deep twilight with a hint of smoke. He didn't look at you, of course, as he passed. But your fingers twitched slightly, remembering the stirring, the splashing, the heavy breath of the vat. There's a certain pride in the way cloth hangs on the line once it's been dyed right. A kind of hush that settles as it dries. Like even the wind doesn't want to interrupt. A quirky tidbit, woad was also believed to have magical properties. Some warriors smeared it on their skin before battle, thinking it gave strength or at least fear factor. You imagine them charging into war, reeking of ferment and brine, looking like Smurfs on a vengeance quest. Intimidating. Sure, but also a bit silly. You prefer your woad on fabric. You stir the next batch and peer into the blue-black froth. Another day, another layer of color. Another secret miracle born from stink and patience. You tie the veil just right low across your eyes, loose enough to cry freely, tight enough to suggest mystery. The fabric is black, of course, always black. A hue that tells mourners what role you play before you even speak. You are a professional mourner, and today's funeral is already your third this week. The town bell tolls long and slow. You take your place beside the open grave like a shadow with perfect posture. Around you, the family sobs, some genuinely, others theatrically. But when it's your turn, your moment, you open your mouth and wail. Not just cry, wail. A trembling, soul-piercing sound that would curdle milk if cows were listening. This is your job, your art, and yes, your survival. Professional mourning wasn't as rare in medieval Europe as people like to think. Wealthy families hired women, always women, to ensure the dead received a send-off soaked in proper grief. Your cries echo across stone chapels and over muddy fields, drawing attention to the sorrow, to the loss, to the social status of the dearly departed. Grief, like weddings, had tears, and you were the soprano at the top of this strange hierarchy. Historians still argue whether the practice originated from pagan rituals, biblical customs, or sheer performance. Some say it was about honoring the dead. Others claim it was all about optics, making sure the neighbors knew someone important had passed. You say it's both, and neither. What matters is that you make people cry, sometimes even yourself. You do have a script of sorts. You mention virtues the deceased never had. You sigh over children they barely acknowledged. You whisper poems no one else remembers. You see the widow clench her fists. That means it's working, but you don't fake everything. Sometimes the faces blur and your own grief leaks through. The brother who died of fever, the mother who slipped during winter. When the priest says ashes to ashes, your own memories stir like dust. You're paid in coins, small ones sometimes, not enough. But you also earn bread wine and the respect of older women who nod from doorways when you pass. They know your voice. They used to hear it every spring when floods took someone they loved. It's not always dignified. There are jokes. Men snicker, boys throw pebbles. One lord once asked if you'd wail for his dog just to impress a dinner guest. You refused, quietly, but you made sure to weep louder than ever at his father's wake. A quirky tidbit. In parts of medieval Italy, mourners like you were called praefeci, and you sometimes practiced crying in private training, your face to crumple in different ways depending on the relationship, wife, daughter, cousin, twice removed. You even had an expression just for favorite servant. You like the veil. It gives you distance, makes you a character, a mirror, a vessel through which other people's sorrow flows. But when the day ends and the last tear dries, you remove it slowly, carefully, fold it, place it in the carved wooden box by your bedside. You don't speak much outside of work. Maybe that's why your voice always comes out raw. Tonight, another family will light another candle, and someone will whisper, "Send for her," the one who cries like she knew him. And you'll come. You always do. You pull your shawl tighter as the wind cuts through the open lime yard. The kilns are already smoking stacks of limestone, crumbling quietly beside roaring flames. You're careful with your footing, one wrong step near the quicklime pit, and you'll lose more than a boot. You are the lime burner's widow, and this job was never supposed to be yours. But here you are. It started the day after his accident. No one said the word, but you knew. The explosion, the blinding white dust, the silence. He was gone, and the town needed lime. So you picked up the shovel. The men blinked. The reeve frowned. But they still came, wagons creaking with more stone to burn. Because someone has to do it. Burning lime is brutal. You shovel crushed rock into the kiln's open-mouth eyes, streaming from heat and smoke. The fire must be kept constant days at a time. You work in shifts, napping on a straw mat nearby, waking every hour to check the burn. If the fire dies, the whole batch is ruined. If it burns too hot, same story. It's a balance like life, but with more ash in your hair. Quicklime calcium oxide was used for everything in the Middle Ages: mortar for buildings, disinfectant for plague pits, even to whitewash walls and bless churches. That's right. You're burning bones and stone so someone else's chapel looks heavenly, and it could kill you just as quickly as it did your husband. Historians still argue whether women truly operated these kilns or just stepped in during emergencies. Some say you were only ever seen shoveling when no men were around. But you've been shoveling for months now, and nobody's offering to take the tool from your hands. Your fingertips are blistered, your eyebrows half singed. You wrap your feet in layers of cloth to keep from blistering on the scorched earth. The dust settles in your lungs. You've started coughing more at night. But the pay's better than spinning, just barely. A strange fact: lime reacts violently with water. Once during a summer storm, the pile began to hiss and steam like a dragon's nest. You had to cover it with wet sacks, sprinting between drops of rain and flares of chemical fire. The smell, acrid, sharp, something like burnt shells and hot iron, stayed in your dress for weeks. You keep a ledger, though no one asked you to. Carefully track what comes in and what leaves. It's not for them, it's for you. Proof that you did this, that the widow carried the weight and the houses still stand. Sometimes you sing to yourself over the roar of the fire. Just little tunes your husband used to hum when work was going well. You don't cry anymore, not because you've healed, but because the kiln has taken every drop of moisture you once had to spare. The townspeople nod to you now. They don't ask questions. They don't offer help, but they pay. And when their walls shine white in the morning sun, you smile. Just a little, because it's your lime holding them up. The room smells of crushed lavender, damp parchment, and something metallic you can't quite name. Shelves line the walls, packed with clay pots and tiny cloth bundles tied with faded string. A cat sleeps in the corner, tail twitching. You roll up your sleeves, crush a few dried rose hips in a pestle, and reach for the mortar. You are Trotula's apprentice, and your hands are steadier than most surgeons. Trotula of Salerno, if she was real, was said to be one of the first female physicians in medieval Europe, known for her work on women's health. You've never met her, of course. You've only read the copies of her work, half faded and ink-blotted. But her words taught you to listen for symptoms others ignore. To blend herbs not just by smell, but by how they speak when mixed. Today's patient is young, pale, and terrified. You hand her a cup of hot nettle tea and pretend not to notice her shaking hands. Your teacher, an older woman with a permanent ink smudge on her lip, once told you midwives know more about life and death than any monk who's never bled. You believed her, still do. You've watched breech births, stitched tears, eased fevers, and whispered blessings into linen soaked with afterbirth. But you're not officially allowed to call yourself a healer, or a doctor, or even literate in some towns. Too much knowledge, and suddenly the word witch follows you like smoke. You keep your books hidden in the back cupboard next to the pennyroyal, the mugwort, the wormwood. The women know where to find you. The men best if they don't. Historians still argue whether Trotula was one person, a group of authors, or a later invention. Some manuscripts suggest she was a composite of several wise women. Others claim her works were altered to fit male-dominated medical schools. What's clear is that someone knew what to do with crushed myrrh and boiled bark, and you carry that legacy forward. Your most requested recipe, medieval birth control. Dangerous work. It involves concoctions that might stop a pregnancy or stop a heartbeat. You tread carefully, measure slowly. The church disapproves, of course. But when a 16-year-old shows up in tears, you don't reach for a sermon. You reach for wild carrot seeds and a steady voice. A quirky tidbit. There were medieval urine wheels, illustrated charts matching urine colors to various ailments. You have one pinned on the pantry door. A guest once mistook it for a decorative plate. You didn't correct them. Some days you're delivering babies. Others you're draining cysts or lancing boils. Sometimes you just listen because listening, it turns out, is medicine too, especially when no one else does. You've made friends with the gravedigger, traded elderflower cordial for rosemary clippings. You both know the same truth. People come to you when life teeters on the edge, and they rarely look you in the eye after. Your apron is stained. Your fingers always smell faintly of thyme. You sleep lightly in case someone knocks at midnight. And yet, for all the danger, the judgment, the risk, you stay. Because healing is rebellion. Because every woman who walks away healthy is another name the fire won't take. You balance the wooden bucket on your hip, one hand steadying the sloshing mess inside. It's heavy, unpleasant, and definitely warm. Your nose has learned not to flinch anymore. You are the toilet attendant in the Lord's Tower Keep, or as the lads downstairs call you, she who carries the stink of kings. Each morning you climb the narrow spiral staircase, past mossy stone and suspicious stains, until you reach the garderobe chamber, the medieval version of a bathroom. It's just a wooden bench with a hole really set high above a shaft that drops down into nothing good. And it's your job to clean it. The nobles don't ask your name. They call and you come. You replace the rushes. You dump the chamber pots. You scrub the stone with vinegar and curses. No matter how elegant the court looks in velvet and brocade, someone has to carry away the evidence of last night's feast. Today, that someone is you. The air up here smells like smoke-boiled cabbage and things better left unnamed. You breathe through your mouth and hum tunelessly as you work. The humming helps. So does imagining their horrified faces if they had to do this. To be fair, you do hear things. People forget you're there or think you're beneath notice. So while you're emptying a pot or wiping down a ledge, you catch whispers: who's sleeping with whom, who's plotting what, who just lost a fortune betting on the wrong night. You carry more secrets than sewage. Historians still argue how sanitation was handled in high medieval castles. Some accounts suggest elaborate waste chutes and even primitive plumbing. Others describe filth simply tossed from windows into the moat. What's certain is that someone always had to clean it up. Often a woman, often you. A quirky tidbit. In some keeps, rose petals were scattered on the floor or steeped in water jars to sweeten the scent. You tried that once. It helped for about 10 minutes. Now you keep a dried orange peel in your pocket. It's not much, but it's something. The other attendants nod at you as you pass in the courtyard, your bucket swinging like a silent bell. You all know this work is invisible until it's not done. Then suddenly, everyone notices. Sometimes children follow you laughing. Sometimes the kitchen staff pretends they don't see you, but the laundress gives you extra lie when she can. Solidarity smells like soap and shared silence. You once asked the steward for gloves. He laughed and said, "Don't waste leather on dung." You nodded and didn't answer, but later you stitched your own from an old apron and beeswaxed them until they held together. Every win counts. In the winter, the contents freeze. In the summer, they bubble. There's no good season for this job, only routine. But there's something comforting about it too. Predictable, unchanging, unlike the politics upstairs. And every time you carry the bucket out and dump it behind the outer wall, you murmur the same words under your breath. A little prayer, a little revenge, and a little reminder that even the highest noble ends up in your hands. Your fingertips ache, not from the heat, but from the way glass pulls elastic and treacherous from the end of the blowpipe. You breathe slowly, steadily, cheeks puffing, eyes squinting against the shimmer. Another goblet forms beneath your breath, like magic spun from fire. You are the glassblower's sister, and your hands have shaped beauty you'll never sign. In the village records, your brother is the artisan. He has the mark the guild stamped the shop. But when the furnace bellows at dawn, it's you who stokes the coals. You who folds molten sand into shimmering baubles. You who repairs the tiny cracks before anyone else notices them. The workshop is blistering, the walls sweat. The tools, pincers, rods, molds are warm before you touch them. The glass glows like a second sun at the end of the pipe, fluid and dangerous. You've been burned a dozen times, maybe more. Your fingertips are glossy with old scars calloused in strange patterns. You joke they're your fingerprints now. The colors are your favorite part. Green from iron blue, from cobalt violet, from manganese if you can get your hands on it. You mix crushed metal oxides into the raw batch, like you're seasoning a stew, watching the furnace twist them into dreams. The window panes that catch light like dew, you made those. But the Lord will never know. Historians still argue whether women worked in glass houses directly or were confined to supportive roles, sweeping, packing, hauling. The truth: many women did everything short of holding the final tool. Guild records erased them, but some signatures survive, scratched in secret under the base of a goblet or along the rim of a suncatcher. Maybe one day someone will find yours. A quirky fact: some medieval glassblowers believed the glass itself had moods. They blamed bad batches on unhappy sand or jealous fire spirits. You don't believe in fire sprites, but you do talk to the furnace, just in case. Your brother likes to take visitors through the workshop. He points to finished pieces and swells with pride. Sometimes he even mentions you. My sister helps with the prep. You nod. You say nothing. You used to dream of having your own kiln, somewhere far enough to be yours, close enough to sell. You sketched designs on parchment goblets shaped like tulips, vases that twist like climbing vines. But kilns are expensive and apprenticeships are for boys. So you stay here making beauty in the margins. When you finish a piece, clear, simple, perfect, you place it on the shelf and walk away. Later, your brother sells it. A merchant compliments the balance. A noblewoman gasps at the elegance. No one asks who made it, but you know, and the fire knows. And maybe, just maybe, the glass remembers too. The final stone slides into place with a soft thunk, sealing out the world forever, or so they say. You kneel briefly, feeling the cool kiss of old stone beneath your knees, then rise and turn toward the slit of light left open in your cell wall. It's barely the width of your hand, but it's all you'll need. You are an anchorite, and you've just been voluntarily bricked into a church. No, really, you chose this. A life of solitude, devotion, silence, and yes, confinement. Behind you, the room is simple, a bed of straw, a small altar, 3 books, and the faint smell of beeswax and dust. You will live here, pray here, eat here, and eventually die here. The wall they built today is not a prison, it's a threshold. The villagers cried when the last stone was laid, some in sadness, some in awe. Children peered through the opening and whispered, as if you'd become a saint by proximity. But the truth is far less poetic. You're still the same woman who once argued with the fishmonger and lost 2 hens to a weasel. You're just quieter now. Anchorites, women more often than men, were spiritual recluses, usually sealed inside a small cell attached to a church. From your one narrow window, you can see the altar and a sliver of sky. Through another, called a squint, you offer spiritual advice to townsfolk, too embarrassed to speak with the priest. Through a third, someone will pass you food once a day. You have no door, you have no plans to leave. Historians still debate whether anchoritic life was truly voluntary or subtly coerced. Some say women sought refuge from arranged marriages or scandal. Others say it was the highest form of piety, a living tomb echoing Christ's own. You say it was both, and neither. What matters is that it was yours. Your first night is strange. The walls hum with old prayers and the creak of church beams shifting above. Mice rustle beneath the floor. You light a candle and its soft glow bounces against the stone, turning the shadows gold. You do not sleep. You listen. The next morning, a woman approaches your outside window. You recognize her voice, Marta, the baker's wife. She asks if her son will recover from the fever. You say yes and mean it. Your words carry more weight now, so you use them carefully. A quirky tradition, anchorites were sometimes given the last rites before entering their cell, as if they had died to the world already. You remember the priest's hands shaking during the ceremony. Yours did not. You record your thoughts in tiny script on scraps of parchment. Some of it is prayer, some of it is poetry, some of it is less holy memories you're afraid of forgetting. Your mother's laugh, the taste of summer pears, the warmth of your dog's fur. People assume you are always serene, always praying. But sometimes you press your ear to the wall and listen to rain, or you sing softly just for yourself, or you stare at a spider weaving a web across the corner and feel strangely comforted. You do not speak often, but when you do, people listen. You are not invisible, you are seen. And somewhere in the stillness between heartbeats, you realize you've never felt freer. You drag the bundle of raw wool across the floor, its fibers clinging to your skirt like desperate burrs. The workshop is dim, thick with dust, and the air crackles with static. You roll up your sleeves and plunge your hands into the fleece. Today, like every day, you are a wool teaser, and your only reward is a warm pile of fluff and blistered palms. Teasing wool isn't delicate. It's not the spinning or the weaving that gets praised in songs. It's the step before beauty, the part where you beat and pull and comb the filth out of tangled fleece, untangling burrs, picking out beetles and separating clumps with fingers already red and raw. If carding is the waltz, teasing is the bar brawl that happens just before. You sit on the low stool by the window and start pulling. You stretch the fibers apart, preparing them for the combers, who will swear they did all the hard work. You smile to yourself. Without you, the wool would still smell like wet sheep and sticks. And in truth, it still kind of does. Wool was the lifeblood of the medieval economy, especially in places like England and Flanders. Cloaks, tapestries, robes, tunics, all of it began with fleece. And before it became soft and luxurious, it passed through your aching hands. That's power, quiet, scratchy power. Historians still argue over just how many steps were done by women versus guild-trained men. Some guilds banned women from officially joining, but conveniently forgot that women did much of the prep work, especially teasing and washing at home unpaid. You know this. Every clump you tease is a stitch in the economic backbone of the realm. But no one's putting your name on the shipment manifest to Bruges. There are rats in the wall again. You hear them skitter bold as anything. You cluck your tongue. They hate the clattering sound. You've been teasing wool so long, even pests know your rhythm. You know the difference between fleece from hill sheep and valley sheep just by touch. Hill wool's rougher, more stubborn. Valley wool parts like a sigh. You can judge the health of a sheep by the smell of its fleece. You've told the shepherd more than once which animals need to be rotated to different pasture. He listens now. A quirky tidbit. Some women teased wool with natural oils, rubbed into their hands goose fat, or even butter to keep the fibers from frizzing and their skin from cracking. You use a mix of pig lard and rosemary. It works, but don't ask about the smell. Your fingers bleed sometimes, tiny nicks from embedded twigs or sharp seeds. You bind them with scraps of linen and keep going. There's always more wool, and always more whispering from the inspectors. Ah, yes, the guild inspector. He's due today. He'll glance at the piles, nod disinterestedly, and grumble about standards. Then he'll offer your cousin a higher price, though it's your teasing that made the difference. You'll let it slide. Again. But one day you'll take the cleanest, softest fleece and hide a red thread in the center. Just one. A secret signature. A single strand that says, "She was here. She did this." You fluff another pile, back sore lungs filled with dust. You watch the cloud drift through the beam of light from the windows suspended like breath in winter. And you think this is not noble work, but it is necessary, and sometimes that's enough. You hold the man's jaw in your left hand steady but not cruel. In your right, a pair of iron pliers rusted around the hinge, warmed slightly over the fire to make the grip more merciful. He is drunk, of course. They usually are. That helps. Sometimes, you are the traveling tooth drawer's assistant, and today, for the third time this month, you'll do the pulling yourself. Your master is asleep in the cardigan, an empty flagon rolling under the bench. He's a good talker and a passable barber, but his drinking has made his hands shake. You've learned that no one questions a girl holding a blood-stained rag when the man behind her snores. So you smile, sweetly press the patient's head against your apron, and pull. The tooth comes loose with a wet pop. You show it to him. It's black with rot and still warm. He groans and tries to thank you through cotton. You hand him a swig of elderberry tincture and send him on his way. Next, tooth drawing wasn't always a licensed trade in the medieval world. Some barbers did it, some apothecaries, some charlatans with wooden carts and big hats. You travel from village to village, often ahead of the plague, often behind famine. Business is steady. People are always losing teeth. Historians still argue how much actual medical knowledge traveling tooth drawers had. Some accounts say they caused more harm than help. Others suggest they saved lives pulling infected teeth before the rot spread to the jaw or brain. You know at least one boy whose fever broke 2 days after you pulled a molar. His mother gave you a goose egg and a copper coin. You still carry the coin. Your tasks are many. Boil the tools, scrub the clamps, pack the herbs, keep the books, smile at angry husbands, reassure crying wives, learn the pressure points that knock a man out cold just in case. You once fended off a thug with a mouthful of knives by threatening to accidentally remove his front teeth. He backed away. You didn't flinch. A quirky tidbit. Some traveling tooth pullers carried a string of extracted teeth tied around their belts to prove their experience. Your master has one. You don't. You think it's grotesque, and also, if we're being honest, it clinks too much when you walk. There's a technique to pulling grip, low twist gently, then yank in one clean motion. If it splinters, you'll be up all night with the bone hook and the blame. You try not to let it splinter. At night, you clean the cart and re-oil the pliers. The stars are your ceiling. The scent of dried mint and old blood lingers in the air. You sharpen the bone scraper until it glints like moonlight. You hum old songs. You count how many teeth you pulled today. 12. 12 tiny victories. 12 pieces of pain removed. 12 reasons you'll sleep a little better if you sleep at all. You dip the quill, flick the excess ink, and glance up at your customer, a weaver's daughter with tear-reddened eyes and a letter half-choked in her throat. To whom shall we address it? You ask, voice soft, steady. She mumbles a name and you nod already, forming the first strokes. You are a letter writer in the market square, and your ink holds more secrets than the town priest. Your desk is a crate turned sideways, your chair, a wobbly stool. The cloth canopy above you strains against the breeze, flapping like an impatient messenger. Around you, vendors shout prices, children chase dogs, and pigs snuffle at discarded turnips. But here, under your patch of shade, it's all about words. Words borrowed, whispered, and sold. Most of your clients can't read. Fewer still can write. But they feel deeply, and that's what you're here for. You put their grief, their longing, their rage into formal script, curled and proper if it's going to a noble, loose and aching if it's going to a lover. For 2 coppers, you'll make them sound wiser than they are. For 3, kinder. For 4, you'll spin whole miracles from scratch. The letter you're writing now is a confession of sorts. A girl apologizing for not answering her betrothed who's gone off to fight in France. You write, "My days are quiet, but my thoughts are full of you," and she nods, tears brimming. You don't know if it's true, but you know it feels true. Historians still argue whether women like you were respected artisans or tolerated anomalies. Some towns gave you licenses, others fined you for unauthorized script. You've paid both fees and bribes. What matters is that people keep coming. You've written letters that ended courtships, others that sparked them. You once penned a fake dream interpretation for a woman who wanted to convince her neighbor to sell a goat. The message, in your dream, the goat symbolizes misfortune. It worked. A quirky tidbit. In some towns, letter writers were paid to read letters aloud for those who received them, adding drama where necessary. You once read a death notice in a voice so reverent, the widow paid you extra, then asked you to write a second letter, canceling the funeral because the man wasn't dead after all. You keep a notebook of phrases that work. By candlelight, I think of your hands. The rain reminds me of your voice. I have spoken your name to the wind. They're vague enough to fit anyone, but powerful enough to make anyone feel seen. Sometimes you slip in a verse of your own, a single line of poetry unsigned, a joke if the letter feels too heavy, a proverb disguised as wisdom. No one notices, but it's your way of staying alive in their stories. Your fingers are ink-stained, your nails trimmed blunt. You wear a ribbon around your wrist, not for fashion, but to wipe spills. You barter with the butcher for paper scraps and with the candle maker for wax to seal your better drafts. The weaver's daughter kisses the envelope. You hand it to her carefully, knowing it may travel further than she ever will. Another client waits. Another heart waits to be translated, and your pen is already ready. You strike the flint, and the candle flickers to life, casting long dancing shadows across the cold stone corridor. The hour is just past midnight. Your bare feet make soft sounds against the worn flagstones as you move from archway to archway. ringing the small handbell at each station. You are the midnight bell ringer of the nunnery, and while the world sleeps, you wake the prayers. Your robe is thick but never quite warm enough. The nunnery's bones are ancient stone walls that keep secrets and trap the chill. Your bell is iron, simple and chipped at the edge, but it makes a sound that cuts through dreams. You stop at each designated point, murmur a verse, and toll the bell once, twice, then move on. Matins, lauds, vigils, the rhythm of divine hours is marked by women like you, keepers of sacred time. Some sisters resent the interruption. Others are already on their knees before the echoes fade. You've learned to walk gently, to ring with reverence, to avoid stepping on the loose tile near the refectory that makes a sound like a yawn. You volunteered for this role, not because you love early hours or cold feet, but because something about the hush of midnight feels holy. The dark has a texture here like thick velvet. It wraps around you, folds over your thoughts, and makes even the smallest movement feel sacred. Historians still argue whether bell ringers were strictly ordained sisters or included laywomen like you. Some records suggest abbesses appointed trusted women from outside the cloister, especially when the community was small or ill-funded. Others insist only vowed nuns could perform such duties. You've heard both sides and kept tolling anyway. You pause in the chapel and light another taper. The flame sputters, catches, then steadies. A cat sister, Gertrude, calls him Lucifer, though not unkindly winds around your ankles. He's your companion, your confidant, and your best mouser. He follows you each night, tail held high, as if he too were summoned by the divine. A quirky tidbit. In some nunneries, cats were officially listed as mouse wardens. In ledgers, granted rations of milk and fish. Yours receives both, plus the occasional stroke behind the ears. He tolerates you because you walk the halls when others don't. You are alike, in a way, solitary, silent, necessary. Once, during a storm, the bell tower was struck. The sound that night was so loud, it woke the entire village. You didn't flinch. You simply stood in the doorway, clutching your bell, waiting for the next hour. Faith, after all, doesn't pause for thunder. You don't always pray aloud. Sometimes your prayers are just breath and movement. A bowed head, a candle relit, a blanket laid quietly over a shivering novice. You speak to the divine in gestures, in footsteps, in silence. The last station is near the herb garden. You ring once more, then turn back. The stars are still out glinting like secrets. You whisper a verse not from scripture, but from a poem you once read tucked inside a psalter. Something about light inside darkness. You liked that line. You return to your cell and blow out the candle. The bell rests beside your bed. You sleep for 3 hours, maybe 4, and then you rise again, because time needs tending, and someone has to ring it into being. You knock 3 times, pause, and knock again. The door creaks open a sliver, and a sheepish face peers out. You hold up the small glazed jar and smile politely. "Good morning," you say. "I'm here for the sample." The man groans, hands over the clay pot, and shuts the door without a word. You are the pea collector for the apothecary, and today, like every day, begins with other people's business. You tie the lid tightly, label it in chalk, and slip it into the straw-lined crate, balanced on your hip. 20 more to go before noon. Urine in medieval medicine was gold, sometimes literally. Its color, clarity, sediment, smell, and even taste, yes, taste, were believed to reveal everything from liver disease to lovesickness. Doctors consulted urine wheels, complex charts matching shades of yellow to possible afflictions. But before they did that, someone had to fetch the pea. Enter you. You're fast, discreet, and blessed with a nose that gave up long ago. Each home has a regular vessel. Some clay, some wood, one made entirely of polished horn. You nod, knock, retrieve, and record. You keep a little book of names and conditions, though you never use it to gossip. Well, almost never. Historians still argue whether pea collectors were apprentices on the path to greater medical work or simply lowly assistants relegated to unsavory errands. Some evidence suggests women often performed the task in cities, especially when patients preferred a quiet, familiar presence. You, of course, are both invisible and indispensable. You return to the apothecary's shop and set your crate near the window. Light is everything. Sunlight makes the pale samples look like wine, the darker ones like stew. Your master peers at them, murmurs gestures, you nod. Take notes, pass the sample, and try not to breathe too deeply. A quirky tidbit. One of your regulars insists on including a flower petal in every jar for luck. Another swears by peeing at sunrise, convinced it keeps demons away. You don't argue, you just collect. Some days when your hands are full and your patience is thin, you dream of mixing your own remedies. You've watched long enough. You know which herbs soothe, which seeds purge, which tinctures make the eyes dilate. You can recite the 7 urines of melancholy in your sleep, but your hands remain on the jars, not the cures. You do more than carry, though. You help interpret, too. Cloudy with flakes, you note for the merchant. Dark amber, faint green rim for the baker's son. The apothecary grunts in agreement. You suspect he relies on your instincts more than he admits. The worst part, spills. You've ruined 2 pairs of shoes and 1 very unfortunate basket. Now you line everything with waxed cloth and carry extra rags, just in case. You keep a sprig of mint tucked behind your ear. Not for scent, though it helps, but as a quiet signal, a badge. She knows things the old women say. She listens, she notices, and you do. At dusk, you carry the empty jars back. You leave them on doorsteps, clean and dry, tied with twine. You walk the streets in silence, moonlight painting the cobblestones silver. It's strange, you think, how something so ordinary, so dismissed, can hold the key to so much. Like truth in amber, like health in a jar, like science hidden in plain sight. You crouch in the alley, fingers dusted with flower pipe raised to your lips. A single note slips into the dusk-high lilting, almost playful. Then another, soft like a secret. Around the corner, a faint scritching begins. You smile. They're coming. You are the rat catcher's daughter, and your song is sharper than any trap. Most people flinch when they see rats. You listen. You learn. You know their patterns, where they hide, what they steal, how they scatter. Your father taught you to read the signs, droppings under the grain sacks. Holes chewed through floorboards, the strange quiet that falls before a nest bursts. But the pipe, that was your idea. The first time you tried it, the neighbors laughed, until they saw you walking out of the mill with 3 rats dancing at your heels, mesmerized. You never told them your trick, how you soaked the reed in honey, how you matched your notes to the rhythm of their scurry. Let them think it was magic. You carry a pouch of powdered belladonna, a sack with a drawstring you stitched yourself, and a slingshot for the bold ones. Your boots are scuffed, your cloak patched. But your reputation travels faster than fleas. Historians still argue whether medieval pest control was a recognized profession or an informal necessity. There were town-sanctioned rat catchers, yes, but many worked the margins, poor, despised, yet strangely vital. Women rarely got credit, even if they knew the nests better than their male counterparts. You're both the shadow and the solution. Your favorite rat was one you didn't kill. Albino, smart, fast. You called him Bishop. He escaped your traps 3 times. On the 4th, he simply sat and stared at you. You let him go. Sometimes you think he still watches you from the rafters. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval towns paid rat catchers by the tail. You still keep a small bundle of them in your pouch, tied together with red thread. Proof. Not that anyone inspects too closely. The baker's wife once accused you of bringing rats on purpose just to earn more coin. You stared at her flatly pulled 4 corpses from your sack and asked if she'd like them returned to her pantry. She turned pale. You got a bonus. You move quickly, whispering warnings to the younger rats. You don't hate them. They're just surviving like you, but they carry things: fleas, fever, the black sleep. You've seen what happens when they multiply. So you do your job efficiently, silently, always with a song. The children in town love you. They call you the pied sister. You correct them. I'm not stealing your brothers, just the vermin. They giggle and offer you pebbles, acorns, once even a dead bird. You thanked them anyway. At night you clean your pipe and lay out your traps. You whisper to the walls, not in fear, but in caution. I know you're there, you say. Come tomorrow and we'll dance. And somewhere in the hush, between the creak of wood and the sigh of settling stone, you hear the faintest rustle, and you smile. Because work never ends. Your fingers trace the cracked porcelain of a teacup. Not because it's your favorite, but because it's the only one you trust. The others are props meant for drama. This one has lines like you, like truth. You are the fortune teller at the Frost Fair, and tonight, the ice creaks beneath the weight of more than just tents. The River Thames has frozen solid again. Wooden stalls stretch from one bank to the other, packed with shouting merchants, steaming meat pies, juggling children, and you tucked behind a curtain of worn velvet candles, flickering despite the stillness. Your sign reads, Madam Selwyn Seer of Secrets. You made the name up. It works. They come in ones and twos, gloved and trembling, pretending it's just for fun. Tell me if I'll marry rich, they laugh. Or will my baby be a boy? You hold their palms, warm them between your own, and study the lines. You nod gravely. You whisper stories. Sometimes they cry. You learn to read palms from your grandmother, who swore each crease was carved at birth by fate itself. You added tea leaves later because it felt theatrical. Tarot cards came after that, borrowed from an actor who owed you 6 pence. You've never returned them. Historians still argue whether medieval fortune-telling was tolerated as harmless fun or punished as heresy. It depended on the year, the town, the bishop, the rumor. Some women were revered, others burned. You stay moving. You speak carefully. You never predict death. A quirky tidbit. In some courts, dream interpreters were paid more than physicians, provided their readings flattered the noble in question. You once told a young baron his dream of falling teeth meant a great change was coming, heralded by strength. He paid double. You know how to read the room. If the client is sad, you lean soft. If they're proud, you lean cryptic. If they smell like coin, you lean mysterious and speak slowly, pausing in all the right places. It's not lying, it's shaping. You once read for a thief who asked nothing, just stared, let you shuffle the deck, nodded at your words, and left without paying. The next day you found a velvet pouch on your chair. Inside, a copper ring, 2 dried rosebuds, and a perfect robin's feather. You still carry it in your pocket. It jingles softly when you walk. The fair crackles with life, but you live on its edge. At night, you pack your table snuff. The candles wrap your shawl tight. You don't sleep in a tent. You sleep in a cart lined with wool scraps, under 3 cloaks stitched together. Your dreams are vivid. You don't interpret your own. The girls nearby sometimes ask you to read for them after closing. You do it for free. You tell them the truth, that they are stronger than they believe, that the men who leave will not take their worth with them, that love is not a currency. They hold your hands a little longer than they should. You let them. Tomorrow the ice may crack, or the fair may vanish, or the bishop's man might frown too long at your table. You know, you always know. But tonight you whisper to the tea leaves, draw one last card, and light one more candle, just in case. You hoist the hammer with practiced ease, the weight familiar in your wrist, the handle worn smooth from years of heat and repetition. Sparks rise as you strike the iron, showering the dirt floor in bursts of light. The forge glows red in the border town dusk. You are the female blacksmith, and tonight, like every night, you shape steel, while the tavern across the road trades stories you once starred in. The men used to laugh when you opened the smithy after your brother died. Let her mend horseshoes for fun, they said. She'll quit when the first nail bounces back. But you didn't. You kept going, callousing your hands and softening your scowl until they stopped talking and just brought the work. Your anvil sits near the open shutter. A sword blade cools in a trough. A set of buckles waits for riveting. In the back, a breastplate that needs rebending after a foolish squire took a lance too high. You roll up your sleeves, sweat already soaking the collar of your tunic, and test the balance of the blade you've just quenched. Historians still argue whether women blacksmiths existed in the Middle Ages or whether all mentions were errors in the records, widows temporarily running shops or helpers behind the scenes. But here you are, proof in sinew and soot, every scar a signature no guild can erase. Your neighbors send their sons to you. You sharpen their scythes, fix their hinges, mend their carts. You charge the same price as your brother did. Sometimes less, sometimes more if the customer smokes too long. One noblewoman rode 2 towns over just to ask for the smith with the quiet hands. You didn't ask how she heard. A quirky fact. Some blacksmiths were believed to have magical protections. Iron was thought to repel evil. People hang horseshoes over doors not because of balance, but because of you. You're not sure about demons, but you have seen a drunk soldier sober up at the sound of your hammer. The forge is both home and armor. You know how to read the metal, feel the shift in temper. When it resists, you adjust. When it yields, you shape. You've repaired swords after duels, shoed horses that limped in and pranced out, once even straightened a bishop's bent crucifix. He blessed you. You didn't bow. The town reeve tried to tax you higher once, claimed the smithy wasn't properly inherited. You handed him a poker fresh from the coals and asked him to hold it. He reconsidered. You don't wear dresses anymore. You don't remember when you stopped. Leather breeches, a patched jerkin boots that bite your heels. You smell of smoke, ash, sweat, and strength, and maybe fear other people's fear. At night, you sit on the steps and watch the children chase fireflies. The dogs bark. The church bell tolls. You rub beeswax into your palms, check the cooling coals, and whisper to the anvil like it's an old friend. This life is hard. It always was. But every strike of the hammer rings like a promise. You will not be bent. You will not break. And no man will write your name in parentheses ever again. The baby latches without fuss. That's something at least. You rock gently in the carved chair, one slipper nudging the worn floorboards of the nursery as moonlight puddles on the cold stone walls. The infant in your arms isn't yours, not by blood, not by bond, but your milk is. You are the wet nurse in the Lord's castle, and you have given your body to a lineage that will never carry your name. You gave birth 3 weeks ago. Your own child was taken to the village wet nurse the same day. You'll see him soon, they said. But you haven't. Not yet. Instead, you were brought here to this gilded room to feed the Lord's firstborn son, ruddy-cheeked, soft-lidded, hungry, in the way only babies are. Your milk comes in strong. It always has. The castle midwife commented on it with surprise, then approval, then detachment. They praised your sturdiness, your calmness, the way your pulse doesn't race when the child cries. You wanted to scream. You didn't. Historians still argue how common the practice truly was. Noble infants fed by lower-class women, sometimes even enslaved ones. Some argue it was a matter of survival. Others say it was a mark of wealth and distance. Either way, the babies suckled, and the mothers wept. Quietly, they gave you fresh linen and a silver comb. You use neither. You miss the smell of your own blankets, the noise of the village, the way your son frowns in his sleep. His name is Tom. No one here asks about him. You sing softly when the infant finishes. A lullaby that's older than you, older than this castle, maybe older than language itself. The child curls against your collarbone and sighs. You feel milk drying on your skin. You don't wipe it away. A quirky tidbit. In some courts, it was believed the nurse's temperament passed to the child through milk, so only cheerful, obedient women were chosen. You laugh sometimes bitterly at the idea that your milk might carry rebellion. The lady of the castle stops by once a day. She watches you, does not speak. Her hands tremble when she reaches for her son. You hand him over gently. He cries. She hands him back. At night, you sit alone by the fire and press your palm to your chest, trying to remember the weight of Tom when he first lay there. You write his name in your mind over and over, like stitching a wound shut. You are not unloved. Your child waits for you, somewhere, with his own borrowed milk and strange hands patting his back. You send a prayer over the wind, though you don't believe in much anymore. In the mirror, you look older than last spring. Not worn out, just worn in, like leather or stone. The castle cat rubs against your ankle. You pick it up, stroke behind its ears. The baby stirs, then settles. You hum again, this time a hymn. The cat purrs. The moon climbs. And in that moment, you belong to neither child, but they both belong to you. You step into the counting room before sunrise boots, muddy from the alley hair, tucked beneath a cap that isn't yours. The wool itches. The trousers are too loose, but the disguise works. No one questions a man with a ledger and a pen. You are the tax collector's clerk in disguise, and for the next few hours you will quietly record the debts of a village that doesn't know your name. The collector thinks you're a boy, or at least he pretends to. You were introduced as your own cousin's nephew's apprentice, 3 layers of fiction deep. He never asks questions, not when the records are perfect and the ink never smudges. You sit beside him, head down, quill moving. You know who paid late, who lied, who wept. You've memorized the shape of every roof in the district, each thatch patched, each barn rotting. You've seen the faces of farmers who gave up wheat for coin, of widows clutching hens like lifelines. Your job is not to judge, just to write. But writing is power. Historians still argue whether women participated in medieval bureaucracy beyond household accounts. Some say no. Others point to letters, ledgers, even coded diary entries that suggest women not only wrote but watched. You do both. Every number you record is also a story. You keep both sets of records, one for him, one for you. A quirky tidbit. In some regions, women were taxed differently, less for land, more for livestock, sometimes exempt if pregnant. You've watched more than one woman fake a belly to protect a cow. You made sure her page got misfiled. You've learned the weight of a coin bag without touching it, the smell of mildew from rotting parchment, the exact shade of red ink that makes villagers flinch. You sharpen your quills with the same knife you carry for protection, not that anyone expects the quiet boy to bite. Once you spotted a bribe folded into a pigskin pouch. You said nothing. Later you wrote the man's name twice, once in ink, once in ash on a scrap you burned. You trust fire more than memory. You know more about these people than their priest does. Who's behind on rent? Who hides grain in the rafters? Who buried their father last week and paid tax anyway? You say nothing, but you see everything. Your disguise isn't perfect. A midwife winked once when she saw you adjusting your binding in the alley. A brewer's wife tipped her hat and handed you an extra roll. You suspect they know, or guess, or simply see the way your hands move when you write, careful, deliberate, defiant. The collector jokes about you sometimes, calls you mouse. You smile. He doesn't know that mice steal what matters and hide it where fire can't reach. At dusk, you return to your room above the bakery. You wash the ink from your fingers and breathe. You take out the other ledger, the real one. The one with footnotes like paid in tears and lied but with reason. You write without fear. One day you tell yourself this will matter. Someone will find these pages and know. Someone will read the names and understand that you were there, that you witnessed, that you were not invisible, just cleverly hidden. You press the spade into the soft earth, the weight of it, grounding you more than the prayers ever did. The cemetery is quiet save for the breeze and the slow rhythm of your own breath. A robin perches on a crooked headstone nearby, tilting its head. You nod to it as if to say, "Yes, I'm still here too." You are the graveyard gardener and your blossoms bloom where no one dares linger. They call you strange, gentle but strange. You hum to the soil. You speak to the dead. You plant violets over soldiers, rosemary over lovers, yarrow over infants. You remember their stories when their families have long since forgotten or moved on. The names blur sometimes, but the faces never do. Your day begins with dew and ends with starlight. You trim ivy from crumbling stones, tuck fallen bird feathers behind statues, sweep the chapel steps, and whisper good mornings to old friends. The sexton mostly ignores you now unless someone important is buried. Then you're asked to make it nice. You always do. They never say thank you. Historians still argue whether medieval graveyards had caretakers devoted to tending flowers and foliage, or whether it was just convenient to assume someone would. They rarely mention women in that role, though in countless parishes, a quiet figure swept paths, refilled candles, and laid flowers no one else brought. You hum as you work. Today's task, replanting the snowdrops by the apothecary's daughter. You remember her laugh, and the way she always smelled faintly of mint and vinegar. You pick a fresh sprig to leave by her stone, a quirky fact. It was once believed that parsley grew only where innocent blood had been spilled. You have a thick patch near the southern wall. You don't ask questions. Children visit, sometimes chasing each other between stones until they're hushed by nurses or nannies. One little girl once left you a drawing, a stick figure with curly hair, a watering can, and lots of hearts. It's pinned inside your cottage next to your seed packets. You sleep in a small hut near the edge of the grounds. The window faces east, so light hits your pillow first thing each morning. Sometimes you wake before it, old habits, or perhaps the souls themselves stirring gently before dawn. They say graveyards are about endings. You disagree. Every seed you plant is a beginning. Every flower that blooms over a name is a reminder that someone somewhere still tends to them. You've buried husbands, wives, children, thieves, bakers, 2 knights and 1 woman who claimed she once met an angel disguised as a beggar. You remember them all. And when the digging is done, when the soil is patted down, and the prayers mumbled, you stay behind. You smooth the earth with your palms. You hum the same lullaby you sang to your mother the day she was laid to rest here. This place is not sad, not really. It's quiet, it's blooming, and it listens. Now the night grows still. You set the spade aside, brush the dirt from your knees, and rise slowly. The moon hangs low over the cemetery, casting a gentle silver glow across every headstone, every flower, every memory. A breeze stirs the leaves, soft like breath. You walk back to your cottage boots, whispering across the grass. The lantern flickers in the window, waiting. Inside, you light a single candle, letting the flames stretch, sway, and settle. The air smells faintly of rosemary, of warm stone, of rain that might come tomorrow. You sit by the window, not to watch, just to be still, to let the hush of the night wrap around you like a quilt. Somewhere in the dark, a fox pads silently between graves. Somewhere a baby turns over in sleep. Somewhere a woman rises to ring a bell that only the sky can hear. And you, dear listener, you lie back now. You've wandered through alleyways and kilns, nursed noble children, and caught rats with music, heard laughter through tears and secrets whispered across church walls. These women forgotten, invisible, strong, they worked through dust and dusk, not for glory, not for power, but because someone had to. And they did it well. So rest easy. You are not alone. Their stories live now in you. Sleep deep, sleep safe, sleep kind. End of script. Sweet dreams.